The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Tombstone, Arizona, and Katherine Brennan watched the man who had brutalized her younger sister crumple to the ground, smoke still rising from the barrel of her father's old revolver. It was July of 1882, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden boardwalks and false-fronted buildings that lined Allen Street. Katherine's hand trembled as she lowered the weapon, her green eyes fixed on the motionless form of Clayton Morrell. Behind her, inside the general store, her sister Emma lay unconscious, her face bloodied and swollen from the savage beating she had endured when she had refused Clayton's unwanted advances. The man had followed Emma into the store, cornered her between the shelves of dry goods, and when she had pushed him away, he had struck her again and again until Katherine had burst through the door. Katherine had not thought. She had only acted. The gun had been in her reticule because their father had insisted both his daughters carry protection when they traveled into town from the ranch. She had drawn it, shouted for Clayton to step away, and when he had turned toward her with that cruel smile still on his lips and his fists still clenched, she had fired. Now the reality of what she had done crashed over her like a wave. People were running toward the scene. Voices shouted. Someone screamed. Katherine's legs felt weak beneath her skirts, and she thought she might collapse right there on the weathered planks of the boardwalk. Then a strong hand steadied her elbow, and a calm voice spoke near her ear. "Easy now, just breathe." She turned to find a tall man beside her, his face shadowed by a worn Stetson hat. He had kind eyes, a deep brown that reminded her of the rich soil after rain, and a square jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, his boots scuffed, and his shirt faded from long days under the sun. "I saw everything," he said quietly, his voice steady and sure. "I was coming out of the saloon across the street. I saw him follow your sister. I saw him attack her through the window. I was running to help when you arrived." "He hurt Emma," Katherine whispered, and her voice broke. "He was killing her. I know, I saw. You did what you had to do." His hand remained on her arm, grounding her, keeping her upright when everything inside her wanted to crumble. The marshal arrived then, a graying man with a thick mustache and hard eyes that had seen too much violence in this wild territory. Marshal Wyatt Earp looked from Clayton's body to Katherine, his expression unreadable. "Katherine Brennan," he said, recognizing her. "What happened here?" Before Katherine could find her voice, the cowboy stepped forward. "Marshal, my name is James Callahan. I witnessed the entire incident. That man," he gestured to Clayton, "followed the young woman into the store and beat her viciously. This lady arrived and ordered him to stop. He turned on her with clear intent to harm, and she defended herself and her sister." "That true, Katherine?" Earp asked. Katherine nodded, finding her voice at last. "That is my sister Emma inside. He cornered her. He struck her repeatedly. I feared he would kill her if I did not stop him." The marshal moved past them into the store, and Katherine heard his sharp intake of breath when he saw Emma's condition. The town doctor was already there, having been fetched by the store owner, and he was tending to Emma's injuries with gentle hands. "Someone get these women to the doctor's office," Earp commanded as he emerged, "and someone else fetch the undertaker for Morrell." He fixed Katherine with a stern look. "You will need to appear before the judge, Miss Brennan, tomorrow morning. But for now, see to your sister." James Callahan stayed close as Katherine was led to the doctor's office, helping support Emma as they carried her carefully down the street. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, her beautiful face barely recognizable beneath the bruising and blood. Katherine felt rage and grief and terror all tangled together in her chest, making it difficult to breathe. At the doctor's office, they laid Emma on a clean cot, and Dr. Matthews worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning wounds and checking for broken bones. Katherine sat beside her sister, holding her hand, murmuring soft reassurances even as tears streamed down her own cheeks. James Callahan remained in the doorway, hat in hand, watching with the expression of deep concern. When Dr. Matthews finally stepped back, wiping his hands on a cloth, James spoke. "How is she, Doc?" "She will live," Dr. Matthews said gravely. But it was a brutal attack. 3 broken ribs, a broken nose, severe contusions. If her sister had not intervened when she did, I have no doubt that man would have killed her. "Will you testify to that tomorrow?" James asked. The doctor nodded. "Without question." Katherine looked up at this stranger who had positioned himself as her ally, this cowboy she had never met before today. "Why are you helping her?" she asked, her voice hoarse. James met her eyes, and she saw genuine compassion there. "Because it is the right thing to do, miss, because I have 2 younger sisters back in Texas, and I would hope that someone would stand up for them if they ever faced such evil." He paused, then added softly, "And because you should not have to face this alone." That night, Katherine refused to leave Emma's side. She sat in a chair beside her sister's cot, dozing fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Emma slept deeply, aided by the laudanum Dr. Matthews had administered for the pain. In the lamplight, her sister looked so young and fragile, though Emma was 20 years old, only 3 years younger than Katherine herself. Their parents had died of fever 2 years ago, leaving Katherine and Emma to run the small ranch they had built on the edge of town. It had not been easy. 2 women alone, trying to manage cattle and horses, fending off men who thought they could take advantage or buy the land for a fraction of its worth. They had persevered through stubbornness and hard work, but Katherine had always feared something like this might happen. She had always worried that someone might hurt Emma, who was sweet and trusting in ways Katherine had never been. And now her worst fear had come to pass, and she had killed a man because of it. Morning came too quickly. Dr. Matthews arrived early, checking on Emma and declaring her stable enough to be left in the care of his nurse. Katherine washed her face in the basin of cool water he provided, changed into the clean dress he had sent someone to fetch from the ranch, and tried to prepare herself for what was to come. James Callahan appeared at the doctor's office just as the church bells tolled 8 o'clock. He had cleaned up, shaved, and wore a pressed shirt beneath his leather vest, though his boots remained the same scuffed ones from yesterday. He offered Katherine his arm. "I thought you might appreciate someone walking with you to the courthouse," he said. Katherine accepted gratefully, laying her hand on his forearm. The gesture felt both formal and intimate, and she found herself intensely aware of his presence beside her as they walked through the morning streets of Tombstone. The courthouse was already crowded. News of the shooting had spread quickly, as news always did in a town this size, and it seemed half of Tombstone had turned out to witness the proceedings. Katherine felt their eyes on her as she entered, felt the weight of their judgment and their curiosity. Judge Anderson was a stern man with silver hair and spectacles perched on his narrow nose. He had served as a circuit judge throughout the Arizona Territory for 15 years, and his reputation for fairness was well established. Katherine took some comfort in that as she stood before his bench. The proceedings began with the marshal's report. Wyatt Earp stood and recounted the facts as he had gathered them, his voice clear and dispassionate. Then he called James Callahan to testify. James stepped forward, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. His testimony was detailed and precise. He described seeing Clayton follow Emma into the store, seeing through the window as Clayton cornered her and began his attack. He described Emma's attempts to defend herself, her obvious terror, the violence of Clayton's blows. He described Katherine's arrival, her command for Clayton to stop, and Clayton's aggressive turn toward her. "He was going to hurt her too, Your Honor," James said firmly. There was no question in my mind. He had rage in his eyes and his fists were still clenched. Miss Brennan gave him clear warning, and when he moved toward her, she fired in defense of her own life and her sister's life. "And you saw all of this clearly?" Judge Anderson asked. "As clearly as I see you now, Your Honor. I was running across the street to intervene myself when Miss Brennan fired. If she had not acted, I fear we would be mourning 2 young women instead of burying 1 violent man." The judge made notes on the papers before him, then called Dr. Matthews to testify. The doctor's testimony was clinical, but damning for the deceased. He described in medical terms the severity of Emma's injuries, the force required to inflict such damage, the likelihood that she would have died without intervention. Then it was Katherine's turn to speak. She approached the witness stand on unsteady legs, her heart pounding so hard she feared everyone in the courtroom could hear it. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore her oath. Judge Anderson's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "Miss Brennan, please tell the court in your own words what happened yesterday." Katherine drew a deep breath and began. She described arriving in town with Emma, splitting up to run different errands, agreeing to meet at the general store. She described entering the store and hearing the sounds of a struggle, seeing Clayton standing over Emma's crumpled form, blood on his knuckles and that terrible smile on his face. "I called to him to stop," she said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to control it. "I drew my father's revolver and I told him to step away from my sister. But he just laughed. He said that Emma had been asking for it, teasing him, and that I should mind my own business or I would get the same. Then he took a step toward me and his hands came up and I knew he meant to hurt me just as he had hurt Emma. So I fired." "Did you intend to kill him?" the judge asked. Katherine closed her eyes briefly. "I intended to stop him, Your Honor. I intended to protect my sister and myself. I never wanted to kill anyone, but I would do it again if I had to because Emma is all the family I have left in this world, and I will not stand by and watch her be murdered." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Anderson rapped his gavel for silence, then sat back in his chair studying Katherine for a long moment. "I've heard testimony from 3 witnesses," he said finally. "A law officer, a doctor, and an independent observer. All 3 accounts corroborate Miss Brennan's statement. Furthermore, Mr. Morrell's reputation in this town was far from sterling. I have had him before me twice before on charges of assault, though both times the victims declined to press charges after his family paid them off." He leaned forward, his eyes on Katherine. "Miss Brennan, this court finds that you acted in defense of family and in defense of your own life. The shooting of Clayton Morrell was justified under the circumstances. You are free to go, and you have this court's sympathy for the terrible situation you were forced into." Relief flooded through Katherine so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and suddenly people were pressing forward, some to offer congratulations, some simply to get a closer look at her. Katherine felt overwhelmed, trapped by the crowd, unable to breathe. Then James was there, his hand on her elbow again, guiding her firmly through the press of bodies and out into the bright sunshine. He did not stop until they were half a block away, standing in the relative quiet of the churchyard. "Are you all right?" he asked, his brown eyes searching her face. Katherine found that she was crying, tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down her cheeks. "I did not think I would walk free," she admitted. "I thought they would hang me." "Not for defending your family," James said gently, "not when the facts were so clear." He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. She took it, wiping at her eyes, embarrassed by her display of emotion. "I do not even know how to thank you, Mr. Callahan. Your testimony may have saved my life." "James," he corrected softly. "Please, call me James, and you need not thank me for telling the truth." They stood there in the shade of the church, and Katherine found herself really looking at him for the first time. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-weathered skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who knew hard work. But his eyes were gentle, and his voice was kind, and Katherine felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. "I should return to Emma," she said, but she did not move. "I will walk with you," James offered. They made their way back to the doctor's office together, walking slowly through the dusty streets. James told her that he had been passing through Tombstone on his way to California, where he hoped to find work on one of the larger ranches. He had worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, had served as a wrangler and a trail boss, and was looking for a place to settle down now that he was approaching 30. "I am tired of wandering," he admitted. "I want land of my own, a home, maybe a family someday. but California seems as good a place as any to find that. Katherine listened, and with each word he spoke, she felt that stirring in her chest grow stronger. There was something about this man, something solid and genuine that drew her in despite her exhaustion and trauma. At the doctor's office, they found Emma awake and sitting up carefully against pillows. Her face was still badly bruised, but her eyes were clear and focused. When she saw Katherine, she began to cry. "Kate," she whispered, through swollen lips, "they told me what you did. They told me you saved me." Katherine rushed to her sister's side, taking her hand carefully. "Of course I did. You are my sister. I would do anything for you." "You killed him," Emma said, fresh tears streaming down her damaged face. "You killed him because of me." "I killed him because he was a monster who would have murdered you," Katherine corrected firmly. "And I would do it 1,000 times over rather than lose you, Emma. Do you understand me? 1,000 times over." Emma clung to her hand, and the sisters wept together while James stood respectfully by the door, giving them privacy in their grief and relief. The days that followed were strange and difficult. Emma healed slowly, her broken ribs causing her pain with every breath, her bruised face gradually shifting from purple to yellow-green. Katherine tended to her constantly, barely sleeping, terrified of losing her sister even though the danger had passed. And James Callahan stayed in Tombstone. He took a room at the boarding house and found work at the livery stable, mucking stalls and shoeing horses to pay for his lodging. Every day he stopped by the doctor's office to check on Emma's recovery and to bring Katherine whatever she might need. Sometimes it was food from the restaurant, sometimes it was fresh flowers he had bought from the vendor in the square. Sometimes it was simply his presence, sitting quietly with Katherine while Emma slept, offering her someone to talk to in the lonely hours. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that surprised her. She told herself it was simply gratitude, that she was thankful for his kindness during this terrible time. But in her more honest moments, usually late at night when sleep eluded her, she admitted to herself that it was more than that. There was something about James that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. Something about his steady presence and his gentle voice that made the world seem less harsh and frightening. And when he smiled at her, his whole face transforming with warmth, she felt her heart flutter in a way it never had before. 2 weeks after the shooting, Emma was well enough to return to the ranch. James rented a wagon and drove them home himself, handling the horses with practiced ease over the rutted road. The ranch house was small but sturdy, built by their father with his own hands from good pine lumber. It sat in a valley with a creek running through it, surrounded by grassland where their small herd of cattle grazed. James helped Emma inside and settled her in her own bed, then went back out to tend to the horses and check on the livestock. Katherine followed him, watching as he moved around the barn with confident efficiency. "You have a good setup here," he commented, running a hand along the solid wood of the stalls. "Your father built well." "He did," Katherine agreed, "but it is hard for 2 women to manage alone. We hire hands during roundup and branding, but otherwise Emma and I do the work ourselves." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. He checked the hooves of their plow horse, examined the tack hanging on the wall, and made several small repairs without being asked. Katherine watched him work, admiring the competence in his movements, the care he took with every task. "You should stay for supper," she said impulsively. "It is the least we can do after all your help." James straightened, hay in his hair and a smile on his lips. "I would like that very much." Katherine cooked chicken and dumplings, one of her mother's recipes, while James washed up at the pump outside. Emma sat at the kitchen table, moving carefully, and teased Katherine about her flushed cheeks and the extra care she was taking with the meal. "You like him," Emma said, with a knowing smile that looked strange on her still bruised face. "Hush," Katherine replied, but she could not deny it. She did like him. She liked him more than she could remember liking anyone. Dinner was warm and comfortable, filled with easy conversation and laughter. James told stories about his adventures on cattle drives, about ornery steers and clever horses and the beauty of the open plains. Katherine told him about their childhood, about their parents and the life they had built here. Emma added her own memories, her voice growing stronger as the evening progressed. After dinner, James helped Katherine wash the dishes while Emma rested in her room. They worked side by side at the wash basin, and Katherine was acutely aware of every time their hands touched in the soapy water, every time their shoulders brushed. "I should head back to town," James said finally, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold outside the window. "But I was wondering if I might come back tomorrow. I noticed your fence line needs some repairs and your barn roof has a few loose shingles." "You do not have to do that," Katherine protested, even as hope leaped in her chest. "I know I do not have to," James said, turning to face her. His eyes were serious as they met hers. "But I want to, if you will have me." Katherine's breath caught. There was something in the way he said those last words, something that suggested he meant more than just helping with repairs. "We would be glad to have you," she said softly. James returned the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He repaired fences and fixed the barn roof and broke in the 2 young horses that had been running wild in the pasture. He worked from sunup to sundown, refusing payment, accepting only meals in Katherine's company as compensation. Emma recovered more each day, her strength returning, her bruises fading. She watched Katherine and James with knowing eyes and a small smile, saying nothing but seeing everything. A month after the shooting, on a warm evening in August, James and Katherine sat together on the porch as the sun set. Emma had gone to bed early, claiming fatigue, but really giving them privacy. The air smelled of sage and dust, and the wild flowers that grew along the creek. "I should be moving on to California," James said quietly, staring out at the horizon. "That was always my plan." Katherine felt her heart sink, though she had known this moment would come. "Yes, I suppose you should. But I do not want to go." She turned to look at him, and found him already watching her. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I want to stay here," James continued. "I want to help you and Emma build this ranch into something even bigger and better than it already is. I want to wake up every morning and know that this is my home, that this is where I belong." He paused, then added in a voice rough with emotion, "I want to stay because of you, Katherine. Because somewhere in these past weeks I have fallen completely in love with you." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "James," she whispered. "You do not have to say anything right now," he said quickly. "I know it has been a difficult time, and I know we have not known each other long, but I had to tell you the truth. I had to let you know how I feel before I leave, even if nothing can come of it." "You really want to stay?" Katherine asked, hardly daring to believe it. "More than I have ever wanted anything." "Then stay," she said simply. "Stay because I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you stood beside me and told me I was not alone. I have been falling deeper ever since." James's face transformed with joy. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and the touch sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Katherine Brennan, would you allow me to court you properly? To stay here and work this ranch with you and Emma, and to see where this feeling between us might lead?" "Yes," Katherine breathed. "Yes, to all of it." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, but Katherine did not wish to pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was Katherine's first kiss, and it felt like coming home. From that moment, everything changed, and yet nothing changed. James moved his few belongings from the boarding house in town to the small bunkhouse on the ranch. He worked the land as if it were already his own, rising before dawn to tend the animals and repair what needed repairing and build what needed building. He took his meals with Katherine and Emma, and in the evenings he sat with Katherine on the porch, holding her hand and talking about everything and nothing. They courted for 6 months, proper and respectable, though Katherine knew from the first day that she would marry him. James was everything she had never known she wanted in a husband. He was strong without being domineering, gentle without being weak, hard-working without being humorless. He treated Emma like the sister he had never had, protecting her and teasing her in equal measure. And he looked at Katherine as if she were the most precious thing in his world. In February of 1883, on a cold, clear morning with snow dusting the distant mountains, James asked Katherine to marry him. He did it properly, getting down on one knee in the barn where they had first really talked, pulling out a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "I do not have much to offer you," he said, his voice shaking slightly with nerves. "Just myself and my love and my promise to work hard every day to make you happy. But if you will have me, Katherine, I swear I will spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." Katherine pulled him to his feet and kissed him soundly. "I will have you, James Callahan, today and every day for the rest of our lives." They were married a month later in the church in Tombstone, with Emma as Katherine's maid of honor, and the livery stable owner who had become James's friend as his best man. Half the town turned out for the wedding, curious and supportive in equal measure. Katherine wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Emma had somehow coaxed into blooming early. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and James kissed her in front of the whole congregation, Katherine felt a joy so complete and perfect that it brought tears to her eyes. This man, this wonderful man who had appeared in her life at its darkest moment, was now hers forever. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by neighbors and friends. There was music and dancing and laughter, and as Katherine waltzed with her new husband under the stars, she thought her heart might burst from happiness. Emma danced too, her injuries fully healed now, her beauty restored. Several young men from town paid her attention, and Katherine was pleased to see her sister smiling and laughing again. The trauma of the attack had not broken Emma's spirit, though she was more cautious now, more aware of the dangers that could lurk even in familiar places. That night, James carried Katherine over the threshold of their bedroom, the one that had been her parents', now freshly cleaned and prepared for them. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Callahan," he said softly. "I love you, Mr. Callahan," she replied. And then there were no more words, only the tender discovery of each other and the consummation of the love that had grown between them. The years that followed were good ones, marked by hard work and steady growth. James proved to be an exceptional rancher, with an eye for good livestock and a talent for breeding strong, healthy cattle. Under his management, with Katherine working beside him, the ranch expanded. They bought more land, built a larger barn, increased their herd. Emma continued to live with them, running the household and helping with the ranch accounts until the day a quiet school teacher named Samuel Moore came to Tombstone and fell hopelessly in love with her. Emma and Samuel were married in the spring of 1884, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, close enough to family but with privacy of their own. Katherine had worried that Emma might never trust a man again after what Clayton had done, but Samuel was gentle and patient, earning Emma's trust slowly and treating her like something infinitely precious. In the summer of 1884, Katherine discovered she was expecting a child. She told James on a hot July evening, the two of them sitting on the porch they had expanded and improved over the past year. James's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms carefully, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her own tears fall. "We're going to be parents," he whispered in wonder. "You and I, Katherine, we are going to have a family." Their son was born in March of 1885, arriving after a long labor that terrified James, but that Katherine endured with Emma and the midwife by her side. When James was finally allowed into the room and saw his son for the first time, cradled in Katherine's exhausted arms, he wept openly. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked softly. "Thomas," James said immediately, "after your father, so that his name and his legacy live on." Thomas Callahan was a healthy, strong baby with his father's brown eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. He grew quickly, thriving in the clean air and open spaces of the ranch. James was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching Thomas to ride almost before the boy could walk, showing him how to care for the animals and work the land. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family. Sarah was born with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the entire household. She was fierce and fearless from the beginning, tagging along after her older brother and refusing to be left out of anything. Emma and Samuel had children of their own, 2 daughters who were close in age to Thomas and Sarah. The families were intertwined, sharing meals and celebrations and the endless work of ranch life. The children grew up together, running wild through the valleys and learning the rhythms of the land. As the years passed, Katherine and James built something remarkable together. Their ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. They employed several hands now, good men who were treated well and who stayed for years. The original small ranch house was expanded until it was large and comfortable, with room for their growing family and frequent guests. But more than the material success, Katherine and James built a life filled with love. Every morning, James kissed Katherine goodbye before heading out to work, and every evening he kissed her hello when he returned. They maintained the habit of sitting together on the porch as the sun set, holding hands and talking about their day. Even after 10 years of marriage, James still looked at Katherine with the same wonder and adoration he had shown from the beginning, and she loved him more deeply with each passing year. The shooting that had brought them together became a distant memory, though Katherine never forgot it entirely. Sometimes at night she still dreamed of that day, of Emma's battered face, and the gun in her hand, and the terrible moment when she had pulled the trigger. But James was always there when she woke from those nightmares, pulling her close and murmuring reassurances until her heart stopped racing. "You saved her," he would remind Katherine gently. "You saved Emma, and because you saved Emma, she met Samuel and had her daughters, and you and I found each other. Something good came from that terrible day." He was right, Katherine knew. She had acted in defense of family, and everything that came after, all the joy and love and life they had built, had stemmed from that single moment of courage. In the summer of 1895, 13 years after that fateful day in Tombstone, the Callahan family gathered for a celebration. Thomas was 10 years old now, a serious boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Sarah was 8, still fierce and fearless. Emma and Samuel's daughters, Rebecca and Margaret, were 11 and 9 respectively. The children played together in the yard while the adults sat on the expanded porch, drinking lemonade and watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you ever regret staying?" Katherine asked James quietly, a question she had asked before and would ask again, always needing reassurance. James turned to her with a smile, reaching for her hand as he always did. His hands were more weathered now, marked by years of hard work, and there was silver threading through his dark hair. But his eyes held the same warmth and love they had always held when he looked at her. "Never," he said firmly, "not for a single moment. This is where I belong, with you, with our children, with this land. You are my home, Katherine. You have been since the day I met you." Katherine leaned against his shoulder, contentment flooding through her. She looked out at the ranch they had built together, at the children who were their legacy, at her sister who had survived and thrived. She thought about the terrified woman she had been that day in Tombstone, holding a smoking gun and waiting for judgment. That woman had been certain her life was over. She could never have imagined this future, this beautiful life, filled with love and family and purpose. She could never have known that the cowboy who testified on her behalf would become the great love of her life, her partner in all things, the father of her children. "I love you," Katherine whispered to James, words she had spoken 10,000 times and would speak 10,000 more. "I love you too," James replied. words that never grew old or lost their meaning, today and always. As the sun set over the Arizona territory and their children's laughter rang out across the land, Catherine Callahan, formerly Katherine Brennan, the woman who had shot a man in defense of her sister, knew that she had everything she had ever needed. She had survived the worst day of her life and found her way to the best life she could have imagined. Justice had been served that day in the courtroom when the judge ruled her actions justified. But true justice, Catherine thought, was this. It was the life she and James had built from the ashes of trauma. It was the love that had grown between them, strong and true and enduring. It was the family they had created and the legacy they would leave behind. Years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Thomas grew into a strong young man, thoughtful and capable, with his father's work ethic and his mother's fierce protectiveness of family. At 18, he was already managing much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, showing a natural talent for the business that filled James with pride. Sarah, at 16, was everything her name suggested, a princess of the prairie who could outride most of the ranch hands and who had a gift with horses that was almost magical. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's gentle nature, though she hid it beneath a facade of toughness. Emma and Samuel's daughters had grown into fine young women as well. Rebecca had married a banker from Tucson and moved to the city, though she visited often. Margaret was courting a young lawyer who had recently opened a practice in Tombstone. In the spring of 1898, as Katherine and James celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary, they sat together in their favorite spot on the porch, a place that had witnessed so many of their most important conversations. 15 years, Katherine mused, her head on James's shoulder. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like no time at all. The best 15 years of my life, James said, kissing the top of her head, and I look forward to at least 15 more, maybe 30, if we are lucky. You are an optimist, James Callahan. I am a man in love with his wife, James corrected with a smile. That makes all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The ranch was quiet around them, the work of the day complete, their children safely home and preparing for bed. Do you remember that day? Katherine asked suddenly. She did not need to specify which day. They both knew. Every detail, James admitted. I remember walking out of that saloon and seeing him follow your sister. I remember the sick feeling in my gut when I realized what was happening. I remember running toward the store and hearing the gunshot. I remember thinking my life was over, Katherine said softly. I remember thinking I would hang for what I had done. But you did not hang. You walked free because you had done nothing wrong. James tightened his arm around her. And I walked into that courtroom and told the truth. And somehow that truth led me here, to you, to this life. You could have walked away, Katherine pointed out. Not for the first time. You could have testified and then continued on to California like you planned. No, James said firmly. I could not have. Not after I saw you, not after I spoke to you. You changed everything for me that day, Katherine. You showed me what courage looks like. You showed me what love for family means, and I knew even then that I wanted to be part of your life. Katherine turned to kiss him. A long, slow kiss that held 15 years of love and passion and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Come to bed, husband, Katherine murmured against his lips. Lead the way, wife, James replied with a grin. The summer of 1899 brought unexpected changes. Thomas announced his intention to marry a young woman named Lucy from a neighboring ranch, a sweet girl with a sharp mind for business who would be an asset to the family. The wedding was planned for the fall. Sarah, meanwhile, had begun spending a great deal of time with the new veterinarian who had set up practice in Tombstone. Dr. William Preston was 24 to Sarah's 17, a kind young man who had studied in the East before returning to the territory of his birth. James watched the courtship carefully, protective of his daughter, but even he had to admit that Preston was respectful and honorable. Emma and Samuel were preparing to become grandparents as Rebecca was expecting her first child. The thought of being a great aunt made Katherine feel ancient and young at the same time. "We are getting old," she complained to James one evening, examining the fine lines around her eyes in the mirror. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the reflection. "We are getting older," he corrected, "but you are more beautiful to me now than you were at 23, and you were breathtaking then." "Flatterer," Katherine accused, but she leaned back against him, smiling. "Truth-teller," James countered. He turned her in his arms to face him. "Katherine, you are the woman who stood up for her sister against a monster. You are the woman who built a ranch with her own 2 hands. You are the mother of my children and the love of my life. A few lines around your eyes only prove that you have lived and loved and laughed. They are marks of honor, not age." Katherine kissed him deeply, still amazed after all these years at his ability to make her feel cherished and valued. "How did I get so lucky?" she wondered aloud. "I ask myself the same question every day," James said seriously, "and I thank God every night that I was walking out of that saloon at exactly the right moment to see you and know that my life was about to change forever." Thomas and Lucy's wedding in October of 1899 was a grand affair with guests from all over the territory. The bride was beautiful in a dress of ivory silk, and Thomas was handsome and proud in his new suit. Katherine cried throughout the ceremony, and James held her hand tightly, his own eyes suspiciously bright. The young couple built a house on the ranch property, planning to take over more of the operations as James and Katherine gradually stepped back. It was the natural progression of things, the passing of one generation to the next, but it still felt bittersweet to Katherine. "Our baby is all grown up," she said to James that night as they lay in bed, exhausted from the celebrations. "He's a good man," James said quietly. "We raised him well. And Lucy will be a good partner for him, just as you have been for me." "Do you think they will be as happy as we have been?" Katherine asked. James considered the question seriously. "I hope so. But I think what we have, Katherine, is rare. We found each other in the midst of tragedy. We built something from nothing. We have faced hardships together and celebrated victories together. That kind of partnership is not given to everyone." "But it can be," Katherine insisted, "if they work at it, if they remember to choose each other every day the way we have." "Then I hope they will," James agreed, pulling her close. "I hope they will be even a fraction as happy as I have been with you." The new century arrived with celebration and speculation about what the future might hold. Katherine was 41 years old now, James 44. They had lived through the wildest days of the Arizona Territory and seen it begin to settle and civilize. There was talk of statehood, of the territory becoming part of the United States proper. The old ways were changing, the frontier closing, but the ranch remained constant. In the spring of 1901, Sarah married William Preston in a ceremony that was smaller than Thomas's, but no less joyful. The newlyweds moved to Tombstone, where William's veterinary practice was thriving, but they visited the ranch often. Sarah helped her husband with his work, showing the same gift with sick and injured animals that she had always shown with horses. Katherine and James found themselves alone in the ranch house for the first time in years, with both children grown and gone to lives of their own. The house felt too big and too quiet at first, but they adjusted, rediscovering the rhythms of their relationship without the demands of active parenting. They spent more time together than ever, working side by side during the day and lingering over dinner in the evenings. They took long rides through the property, just the two of them, exploring favorite spots and making new memories. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, their passion for each other remained as strong as it had been when they were newlyweds. "I thought I might lose you when the children left," Katherine admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 2 decades now. "I thought with them gone, we might not know what to say to each other anymore." James looked at her in surprise. "Katherine, you are my best friend as well as my wife. We could never run out of things to say to each other." "I know that now," Katherine said with a smile. "But I worried." "Silly, I suppose. Not silly, natural. James squeezed her hand. But you should know by now that you are stuck with me, for better or worse, in good times and bad, until death do us part. I meant those vows, every word. I meant them too, Katherine assured him, and I would say them again tomorrow if given the chance. Then let us say them now, James suggested, turning to face her fully. I, James Callahan, take you, Katherine, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the rest of my days. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes as she responded, her voice thick with emotion. I, Katherine Callahan, take you, James, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the rest of my days. They sealed their renewed vows with a kiss, tender and sweet, and full of the love that had sustained them through nearly 2 decades of marriage. In 1903, Thomas and Lucy welcomed their first child, a healthy baby boy they named James after his grandfather. Katherine held her grandson for the first time and felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. This child was the future, the continuation of everything she and James had built together. James Sr. was equally smitten, spending hours with the baby, telling him stories and singing him songs. Watching her husband with their grandson, Katherine fell in love with him all over again. 2 years later, Sarah and William had twin girls, much to everyone's surprise and delight. The babies were named Katherine and Emma, after their grandmother and great-aunt, and Katherine wept when she learned of the honor. Emma herself was a grandmother several times over now, with Rebecca having 3 children and Margaret 2. The families gathered often for celebrations and holidays, the ranch house filled with the sounds of children's laughter and adult conversation. On a warm evening in June of 1907, Katherine and James celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary surrounded by family. 24 years since that day in the church when they had promised to love each other forever. 25 years since that terrible, wonderful day in Tombstone when their lives had intersected in tragedy and begun a journey toward joy. The gathering was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard just as they had been for their wedding reception all those years ago. There was food and music and dancing. The grandchildren ran wild through the grass while the adults talked and laughed. Thomas and Lucy were expecting their 3rd child. Sarah and William were happy in Tombstone, with William's practice thriving and Sarah helping establish a sanctuary for injured wild horses. Emma and Samuel were growing old gracefully, still devoted to each other after more than 20 years of marriage. As the sun began to set, James stood and called for everyone's attention. He waited until the crowd quieted, then reached for Katherine's hand and pulled her to her feet beside him. 24 years ago today, James began, his voice carrying across the yard. I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was already remarkable when I met her. She had saved her sister's life and faced down a courtroom with courage and grace. But in the years since, she has become even more amazing to me. Katherine felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned to her, but James continued, his gaze locked on her face. Katherine has been my partner in building this ranch. She has been my companion through good times and hard times. She has given me 2 incredible children and stood beside me as we raised them to be good, strong people. She has made this house a home and made my life worth living. His voice grew rough with emotion. I stood before this community 24 years ago and promised to love her forever. And every day since I have kept that promise. Every single day I have chosen her, chosen us, chosen this life we built together. Tears were streaming down Katherine's face now, and she saw that many of their guests were crying as well. Emma was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Thomas had his arm around Lucy, holding her close. Sarah and William were holding hands, their faces soft with emotion. Katherine Brennan Callahan, James said softly, you are my heart, my soul, my everything. Thank you for saying yes to me all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every day, every moment, every breath we have shared. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, renewed here before God and our family. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Katherine could not speak through her tears, but she did not need to. She threw her arms around James's neck and kissed him deeply, not caring that their entire family was watching, not caring about anything except this man who had been her rock, her anchor, her home for nearly a quarter of a century. When they finally pulled apart, the entire gathering erupted in applause and cheers. The children shouted happily, and the adults smiled through their tears. It was a moment of pure joy, of love celebrated and affirmed, and Katherine knew she would remember it for the rest of her life. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children and grandchildren had retired to their various houses on the property, Katherine and James sat on their porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "That was quite a speech," Katherine said softly, her head on James's shoulder. "I meant every word," James replied. "I know you did. You always do." Katherine lifted her head to look at him. "You know, I think back to that day in Tombstone sometimes, and I can hardly believe it was real. It feels like something from a different life, something that happened to a different person." "In a way, it was a different person," James said thoughtfully. "We are not the same people we were 25 years ago. We have grown and changed together. But the core of who we are, the core of what we feel for each other, that has remained constant." "I was so frightened that day," Katherine remembered. "When I pulled that trigger, when I saw Clayton fall, I thought my life was ending. I thought I had thrown away my future in that single moment." "Instead, you claimed your future," James corrected gently. "You chose Emma's life and your own over a man who would have destroyed you both. And that choice, terrible as it was, led you to me." "Do you think things happen for a reason?" Katherine asked. "Do you think we were meant to find each other?" James considered the question carefully. "I do not know if everything happens for a reason, but I know that I walked out of that saloon at exactly the right moment to witness what happened. I know that something inside me recognized you immediately, recognized that you were important, that you were going to matter to me. Maybe that was fate. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe it was just two people who needed each other finding each other at exactly the right moment." "I like that," Katherine said softly. "Two people who needed each other finding each other." "And never letting go," James added, tightening his arm around her. They sat in peaceful silence, surrounded by the land they had worked for so many years, the legacy they had built together. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, capturing moments from their life together, their wedding day, the birth of their children, holidays and celebrations and ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. "James," Katherine said suddenly, "do you have any regrets? Anything you wish you had done differently?" "Not a single one," James replied immediately. "Oh, I have made mistakes. We both have. But regrets? No. This life we have built, this family we have raised, this love we share, it is everything I could have wanted and more than I ever dreamed of having." "Me too," Katherine whispered. "No regrets, only gratitude." "For what?" James asked, though he was smiling, clearly knowing the answer. "For you," Katherine said simply. "For your testimony that set me free, for your patience in courting me, for your love that has sustained me, for your partnership that has made everything possible, for giving me this life, these children, these memories, for every morning I wake up beside you and every night I fall asleep in your arms. For all of it, James, I am grateful for all of it." James turned to kiss her, slow and sweet, and full of all the love that still burned between them after 24 years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come to bed, my love," James murmured. "Always," Katherine replied. They walked into the house hand in hand, as they had done 10,000 times before and would do 10,000 times more, God willing. Behind them, the Arizona night settled over the ranch, peaceful and quiet. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to a love that had begun in tragedy and bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. Katherine Brennan had shot a man to defend her sister. James Callahan had testified that she had acted in defense of family. And from that terrible, necessary act of violence had grown a love story for the ages, a partnership that had withstood time and hardship and change, emerging stronger with each passing year. They had built a life together on the foundation of courage and truth. They had raised children who honored that foundation. They had created a legacy that would endure for generations. And through it all, they had loved each other with a devotion that never wavered, never faltered, never failed. As they lay in bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, Katherine Callahan knew that she was the luckiest woman alive. She had faced the worst moment of her life and found the best thing in it. She had defended her family and found her future. She had pulled a trigger in desperation and found love beyond measure. "I love you," she whispered to James in the darkness. "I love you," he whispered back, "always and forever." And in the morning they would wake together and begin another day on the ranch they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living the life they had chosen together. There would be work to do and grandchildren to spoil and meals to share. There would be laughter and conversation and the quiet comfort of companionship. There would be love, the kind that endures through decades and generations, the kind that transforms ordinary days into something extraordinary, the kind that makes every moment worth living. The Wild West had been tamed, but the love between Katherine and James Callahan remained wild and free and fierce, a testament to the power of two hearts beating as one. Two souls intertwined so completely that neither could imagine life without the other. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy of all. Not the ranch or the cattle or the land, but the love. The enduring, unshakable, eternal love that had begun with a gunshot and a testimony and had grown into something that would outlast them both, living on in their children and grandchildren and all the generations yet to come. The woman who had shot a man to defend her sister had found justice, yes. But more than that, she had found love. And the cowboy who had testified on her behalf had found his home. Together they had found everything that mattered, everything that endured, everything that made life worth living. Together they had found forever.